I used to be someone people noticed. In meetings, on panels, in trade magazines, I had a voice, and people listened. I was proud of what I built, and I knew exactly where I was headed. But when Daniel came to me with that look in his eyes, the one filled with dreams and risk, something in me softened. I believed in him, in us, so I stepped aside. I shelved my promotions, put my ambitions on hold, and said yes to the future we were about to build together. It wasn't easy, but I made it work. I took over the bills, kept the house running, and quietly advised him on everything from strategy to hiring. I made him sharper, calmer, more credible. Behind every pitch deck he presented was a night we spent on the couch, rewriting it together. I didn't need credit, not then. What mattered was seeing him rise, knowing I had something to do with it. That used to be enough, until it wasn't. I started noticing the shift, the silence, the distance. He'd take longer to get home. His compliments dried up. He stopped asking for my opinion. I tried to brush it off at first. Maybe he was just stressed. Maybe the business was demanding too much. But deep down, I knew something had changed. I just didn't want to say it out loud. Not yet. Then came the day that shattered the illusion. I remember the weather. That ridiculous detail sticks. Sunny, with the kind of breeze that makes you think things are okay. He sat across from me at the kitchen table like he was about to discuss groceries. No tremble in his voice, no guilt in his eyes. "I'm leaving," he said, calm as ever. "I've met someone. Her name is Sophie. She makes me feel alive." I didn't scream, I didn't cry. I just stared at the man I'd built a life around, and realized he'd been dismantling it without me. I thought of everything I'd given up. The career I loved, the connections I let fade, the years of invisible labor I poured into his success. I had no fancy title, no paycheck, no recognition, just fading memories of applause I used to earn for myself. And now, I wasn't just being left, I was being replaced by someone younger, lighter, unburdened by sacrifice. It was like being erased in slow motion. But here's the part he never saw coming. I didn't fall apart. Something inside me cracked, yes, but it wasn't weakness. It was pressure finally releasing, a dam breaking. The moment he walked out, he thought he'd broken me. What he actually did was set something free. I sat in the silence that followed and made myself one promise. He took my years. He will not take what comes next. I boxed up the life we'd built piece by piece. His suits, his books, the framed photos from our so-called power couple days, all packed neatly, methodically. It wasn't bitterness that drove me. It was clarity. Every item reminded me of who I'd been while I was busy making him everything he wanted to be. I didn't throw anything. I didn't burn anything. I simply removed him from the center of my life, like closing a tab that had been draining my energy for too long. People asked how I was holding up, and I gave them the answer they expected. One day at a time, I'd smile. But inside, I was rewriting the story. I wasn't going to be the woman who got left. I was going to be the woman who learned, who recalibrated, who rose. I spent those quiet nights not just healing, but planning. Every late hour he'd spent building his dream. Now those hours belonged to me, because what Daniel didn't realize was that I'd never lost my fire. I'd just dimmed it for him. And now, without him, that flame wasn't just returning. It was raging. He took my years. I took the blow, and turned it into fuel. The first morning after he left, I woke up to silence. No footsteps, no clinking coffee mugs. Just me, and a house that suddenly felt too big. I sat at the kitchen table with a pen and a notepad, not to journal, but to list, to map. If I could build a life around a man, I could build one without him. I started with one small decision: sign up for a business course. Something to shake off the rust and remind myself what I was made of. Walking into that first class felt like stepping into sunlight after years in the shade. I was older than most of the students, sure, but I wasn't intimidated. If anything, I was hungry. My mind lit up in ways I hadn't felt in years. Strategy, market positioning, growth models, all the things I used to whisper in Daniel's ear. Only now, I wasn't behind anyone. I was at the front, taking notes for myself, not for someone else's glory. Soon, one course turned into 2, then 3. I reconnected with former colleagues, people who still remembered my fire, who'd always wondered why I disappeared. One coffee meeting led to another. Opportunities opened. It was like the universe had been waiting for me to remember who I was. I didn't just want a job. I wanted a name again, a legacy of my own making. That's when the idea struck me. A consultancy firm. Not just any firm, but one built on what I'd been doing in the shadows for years. Business strategy, growth mapping, brand positioning, all the skills I'd handed to Daniel like wrapped gifts. This time, they were mine to keep. I registered the business under my maiden name. A clean break. A quiet reclamation of everything I'd shelved to help someone else shine. It started small, just me, a laptop, and a desk that doubled as my dining table. But word spread fast. A few early clients turned into a steady stream. I wasn't chasing, I was being found. They didn't see a woman scorned. They saw sharp instincts, fast thinking, and the kind of strategic brain that could turn floundering ideas into six-figure realities. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't asking for approval. I was sending invoices. There was a shift inside me, subtle but powerful. I stopped checking Daniel's social media. I stopped wondering what Sophie looked like without filters. My focus shifted completely. I had meetings to prep for, pitches to refine, and a brand to build from the ground up. The more I created, the more I healed. And with every new milestone, I whispered a quiet truth to myself. He walked away from this. A year in, I moved into my first real office. Nothing flashy, but mine. The walls were bare at first, but they felt full of promise. I chose the furniture myself. Sleek, strong, understated. Like me. Every decision I made, from hiring my first assistant to designing the logo, carried the weight of freedom. No second guessing, no man to run it by. Just instinct, sharpened by everything I'd been through. Clients kept coming. Some were startups, others were legacy companies looking to modernize. And me? I wasn't just consulting, I was leading. The same voice I once held back in boardrooms now carried authority, respect. Some even called me a powerhouse. It made me laugh sometimes. If only they knew the woman behind that title once sat alone at a kitchen table, betrayed and forgotten, piecing herself back together over black coffee and unpaid bills. And then came the moment I hadn't expected. Peace. Not the loud kind. The quiet, steady kind that settles in your bones when you know you're exactly where you're meant to be. He left me for someone younger, but I built something timeless, out of my own name, my own grit, and every broken piece I refused to throw away. Business was booming. I had a solid team, high-profile clients, and a waitlist I never imagined I'd have. So when the time came to open a flagship office downtown, bright windows, high ceilings, energy buzzing through every corner, I didn't hesitate. I was ready to expand. I posted listings for new roles, project managers, admin staff, client liaisons, and then one resume landed in my inbox, and I froze. The name was Sophie. Same soft curls, same overconfident tone in her cover letter. She didn't recognize my maiden name, of course. She wouldn't. But I knew exactly who she was, the woman who replaced me in my own marriage. And now here she was, applying for a job in the company I built from the ashes of that betrayal. Life has a wicked sense of humor. I read every word of that resume with a strange calm, desperate, scattered work history, recently laid off. She was flailing. I sat back in my chair and stared at her application. Most people would have deleted it. Laughed maybe, but I saw something different. I saw an opportunity. Not for revenge. I was past that. I didn't need to destroy anyone. I just needed to let the story play out. So I invited her in for an interview. And when she walked through the glass doors, clueless and eager, I greeted her with the warmest smile I've ever faked. She didn't recognize me. Not even a flicker of suspicion. I was older, sharper, more composed than the version of me she likely imagined. She extended her hand, all polished nerves and practiced charm, and I shook it like I didn't know every inch of the wrecking ball she once was. I asked her about her strengths, her weaknesses, why she'd left her last job. She stumbled a little, eyes darting, but kept going. She needed this. I watched her closely, studying the cracks in her confidence. She talked about wanting to prove herself, about learning from her mistakes, about needing structure. The irony was thick enough to taste. This was the woman Daniel once chose over me. And here she was, uncertain, underqualified, utterly unaware. I didn't interrupt. I didn't dig. I just let her talk, let her fill the space with words she hoped would land somewhere safe. When the interview ended, I stood and thanked her for coming. She smiled, relieved, maybe even hopeful, and walked out with a kind of cautious optimism. I stood there in the quiet, letting the silence settle around me. My reflection stared back from the glass door, and for a second I felt something close to pity. But it passed quickly. After all, my husband once hired a replacement. Now I'd return the favor. I hired her the next day, sent the offer letter myself. I kept it professional. Salary, benefits, onboarding details, nothing personal. She accepted within the hour. And just like that, the woman who shattered my marriage walked into a new chapter. One I authored. I didn't feel triumph. It was something quieter, more deliberate, like moving chess pieces in a game she didn't know she was playing. Her first day was uneventful, if you were watching from the outside. She asked questions, tried to impress, clearly eager to prove herself. I kept my tone even, friendly but not warm. I gave her clear instructions, high expectations, tight deadlines. Nothing she could complain about. But nothing came easy either. She was good at faking confidence. But I was better at spotting the cracks beneath it. I watched her settle in, unaware of the truth sitting right across from her. She laughed with the team, took notes in meetings, sent me polite emails with little exclamation points. And every time she passed my office, I wondered, did she feel it? That subtle tension in the air? That quiet thread pulling tight around her? Probably not yet. But soon, she would. Because what was coming next was never in her playbook. She started to struggle by week 3. Not enough to be fired, just enough to notice. Deadlines slipped, notes were sloppy, instructions had to be repeated, and every time I corrected her, I saw it chip away at her shine. She still smiled, still played the eager professional, but it was thinner now. Her confidence was unraveling, not because I was cruel, but because I was precise. And precision has a way of exposing people who aren't prepared. Sometimes she lingered after meetings, trying to charm her way into rapport. "You're such a strong leader," she'd say, eyes searching mine. "It's honestly inspiring." I'd thank her politely and move on, watching her confusion build. She couldn't figure me out. This woman with high standards and no warmth. The same woman who signed her checks. The same woman who studied her every move like she was watching a performance she'd already seen before. Then came the updates she started giving Daniel. I know this because I heard her, hushed calls in the hallway, thinking no one was around. "My boss is impossible," she'd whisper. "She's cold, like nothing gets to her." I almost laughed the first time. The irony of her complaining about the emotional distance of a woman she helped destroy was poetic. And yet, I said nothing. Because the stage was being set, and I was almost ready to raise the curtain. The event was something we'd been planning for months, a client showcase, a celebration of growth. The kind of evening with champagne flutes, sleek name tags, and just enough candlelight to make everyone feel important. Sophie had a role, of course. She handled logistics, checked in guests, smiled for photos. She even wore a dress that looked like she was trying too hard. I let her have that moment. She thought she was blending in. She had no idea she was the centerpiece. I stood by the entrance as the room filled, shaking hands, making introductions. And then I saw him. Daniel. He arrived late, as always, flanked by someone from his firm. His eyes scanned the crowd, confident, until they landed on me. And for a moment, just a second, I saw the flicker. Recognition, regret. Something unspoken lodged in his throat. I walked toward the podium slowly, with purpose, and took the mic. I spoke about growth, about resilience, about transformation. And then, as I wrapped up, I introduced myself, this time using the full name I'd legally shed years ago. "Caroline Ellis Manning," I said, clear, steady. My voice didn't shake. Across the room, I watched his smile fall. Sophie froze, mid-laugh. The applause started before they could move. In that single name, I reminded them both who I was, the woman who built him and the one who buried him. After the event, the room buzzed with the usual chatter, but around them, it was different. Daniel lingered by the bar, looking like he wanted to say something but couldn't find the script. Sophie didn't speak at all. She just stared at me, expressionless, as if trying to rearrange the pieces of a puzzle she hadn't realized she was part of. I gave her a polite nod. Nothing more. I didn't need to explain. The silence between us said everything. The next morning, she came in quieter. No small talk. No flattery. She avoided my gaze, buried herself in her desk, and worked with the kind of tension that only truth brings. I didn't acknowledge what had happened. I just handed her a new project file and reminded her of the deadline. She took it with both hands, but her fingers trembled. She was unraveling now, not because I'd exposed her, but because I hadn't. That's the thing about power. Real power doesn't scream. It doesn't punish. It doesn't have to. It stands still and lets the truth settle into the cracks. And now they both had to live in it. The truth of who I was, what I'd built, and the quiet storm they'd invited into their lives. I didn't need revenge. I had something stronger. I had control. And I knew the real reckoning was still ahead. She came into my office the following week with a resignation letter clutched like a lifeline. Her voice was steady, but her eyes were pleading. "I don't think this role is the right fit," she said. I looked at her for a long second, then slid the paper back across the desk. "You signed a contract," I replied gently. 6-month minimum, remember? She blinked. I could see her calculating, hoping for a loophole. But I didn't flinch. I had no intention of letting her go early. Daniel called that evening. His voice carried a false calm, the kind people use when they're begging behind a mask of diplomacy. "Caroline," he said, "this has gone far enough. Let her leave. Just move on." I smiled into the phone, not because I was amused, but because of how little he understood. "I already have," I told him. "She's just finishing what you two started." He went quiet. Not angry, not wounded, just stunned. He never expected me to hold the pen this long. And here's the thing. I didn't keep her out of spite. I kept her because I was no longer the woman they thought they'd left behind. This wasn't about revenge. It was about reclamation. Every day she clocked in, every task she completed, was a quiet rewriting of the story they wrote without my consent. She used to be the ending. Now, she was just a footnote in the prologue of everything I'd become. I watched her shrink a little more each day. Her posture changed. Her voice got softer. The sparkle she once weaponized dulled under fluorescent lights and mounting deadlines. She was still polite, still showed up, but the fire was gone. And maybe that's what hurt her the most, realizing I wouldn't play the villain she could blame. I gave her no outburst, no breakdown, no confirmation that I was the wounded woman scorned. Just expectations, structure, accountability. People around the office started noticing, asking subtle questions. "Is everything okay with Sophie?" I'd nod, professional as ever. "Just adjusting, I think." I never said more. I didn't have to. Her unraveling was something she carried inside, and I didn't need to touch a single thread. She had walked into my world thinking she was untouchable, but now she understood. I didn't need to raise my voice to be heard. I didn't need to humiliate her to win, and somewhere in the middle of all that quiet reckoning, the nomination came. A prestigious award, Businesswoman of the Year, industry-wide recognition. My team cheered, my inbox overflowed. But what struck me most wasn't the plaque or the press. It was the realization that I'd become the woman I used to envy. Strong, seen, respected. Not for who I'd been beside, but for who I'd chosen to become when no one was clapping. The night of the award ceremony, I stood beneath the lights in a tailored black dress that fit like armor. My name was called, applause followed, and for a moment, everything slowed. I walked to the stage with the calm of a woman who had already lived the plot twist, and come out better. The speech I gave wasn't long. I didn't list achievements or thank everyone by name. I simply said, "This is for every woman who chose herself after being forgotten." The room went still. Then came the applause. The kind that doesn't just clap for success, but for survival. I spotted Daniel in the back, leaning against a wall, arms folded. Sophie stood next to him, eyes low. They had front row seats to the life they once underestimated. And that was the gift they never saw coming. Not pain, not punishment, but perspective. I didn't need to remind them who I was. My presence did that on its own. because I gave him my future once. I handed it over with open hands, full of faith. And now he watches me own it, every single day. With grace, with fire, with the kind of power that doesn't ask to be recognized, but demands it simply by existing. And that was the real ending. The one they never wrote, the one I claimed for myself.